July 8, 1976, over 1,000 people crammed into Parliament Hill Lido in North London, desperate to escape the relentless sun. In the middle of that packed crowd, 15-year-old Enrico Sidoli was attacked by a gang of youths, beaten, held underwater, drowned in the deep end. Hundreds watched, and nobody stepped in to save him. Enrico fought for 11 days in hospital before he died. Almost 50 years on, his killers are still free. The case remains unsolved. How can a murder in front of 1,000 witnesses go unpunished? Welcome to Crimes That Haunt Us. We release a new case every Sunday at 6 p.m, so hit subscribe and don't miss the next one. And let me know your thoughts on this case in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. In the working-class neighbourhood of Kentish Town, North London, Enrico Sidoli was born in 1961 into a proud Italian immigrant family. His parents, Antonio and Luisa Sidoli, were Italian restaurateurs who worked tirelessly in their business while raising their children at their home on the Prince of Wales Road. Enrico had many siblings, including sisters Elizabeth, Rosemary, and Yolanda, as well as a brother, Andrew. Enrico, named after the famous Italian opera tenor Enrico Caruso, grew up surrounded by strong Italian heritage, with family outings frequently involving visits to Roman archaeological sites in and around London. From a very young age, Enrico endured relentless bullying that marked his childhood with constant fear. A neck injury he suffered when young caused his neck to twitch side to side involuntarily, leading to cruel local boys to nickname him Noddy. His mother Louisa would later speak with profound emotion about how she never wanted to let her son out of the house because of the bullies. She recalled one particularly distressing incident when Enrico had come home with nasty words written all over his face. Despite this torment, those closest to him described Enrico as a well-mannered, polite boy who had lots of friends and carried no nastiness to him at all. His parents referred to him affectionately as a slow reader, and he attended the Holly Court Park School, a special needs school in an era when such children were often labelled as backward boys. Enrico was gentle and musically gifted, often lost in a fantasy world where he dreamed of becoming a DJ, talking incessantly with enthusiasm. But the bullying persisted relentlessly, making everyday life a struggle for the vulnerable teenager. The summer of 1976 was one of the hottest on record in Britain, with a prolonged heatwave drawing massive crowds to outdoor pools for relief. On July 8th, at Parliament Hill Lido, the historic Art Deco open-air swimming pool on Hampstead Heath was thronged with between 800 to 1,000 people, including families and hundreds of children. 4 lifeguards were on duty that day, but the venue was known for frequent horseplay and hooliganism amid the chaos of the packed conditions. It is said that around 400 children from the local schools in the area had played truant that day, with many believed to be among the crowd at the Lido. On that sweltering afternoon of July 8, 1976, 15-year-old Enrico Sidoli had skipped school and headed to Parliament Hill Lido with his sister and a cousin, seeking relief from the oppressive heatwave in the crowded open-air pool. Tragically, neither his sister nor his cousin witnessed the brutal assault that unfolded next. Sometime around 2:30 p.m., Enrico became entangled in a heated argument with a trio of older youths, swaggering bullies known locally as the Kentish Town Mob. The confrontation escalated with terrifying speed. The group punched and kicked Enrico repeatedly, inflicting visible bruising to his face and neck, before sending him hurtling into the deep end of the pool beside the slide. Enrico could not swim. 2 of the boys leaped in after him, laughing coldly as they repeatedly forced him underwater, pushing him down, allowing him brief, desperate gasps at the surface, then submerging him again until his struggles ceased. He was callously discarded, and his body sunk to the bottom of the pool, where he remained lifeless beneath the water for 3 to 4 minutes. Dozens of youths likely watched the vicious attack unfold, yet chose to do nothing, frozen in the chaos of the packed Lido. One witness says that one of the trio, who had been part of the initial assault, entered the water himself, attempting to pull Enrico up as realization dawned that the horseplay had turned deadly. But the effort failed, and Enrico sank helplessly back to the bottom of the 10-foot deep pool. A young girl spotted his motionless body far below and raced to alert lifeguard Michael Pearce. Meanwhile, a brave 12-year-old boy who was diving to retrieve tin cans from the pool floor discovered Enrico bent over double, clutching his stomach. He valiantly hauled the body halfway to the surface, but overwhelmed by the weight, he was forced to release it. Then the lifeguard Michael Pearce dove in without hesitation, dragging the unconscious teenager to the side of the pool, but Enrico's heart had already stopped beating for several agonizing minutes. As hundreds began gathering in growing horror around the poolside, 2 off-duty nurses fought desperately for 20 minutes, administering mouth-to-mouth resuscitation amid the unfolding nightmare. In a cruel twist of irony, one of these nurses discovered her handbag had been stolen as she battled to save the boy's life. An amateur photographer present that day captured the frantic resuscitation efforts, a single frame that immortalized 116 onlookers in the background. Police would meticulously trace most of these individuals over time, yet around 30 of them remain unaccounted for to this day. This photograph would later become a pivotal piece of evidence when investigators released an enhanced section revealing a dark-haired young swimmer seemingly exiting the pool while all eyes focus on the desperate attempts to revive Enrico, a man police have long sought after. He too remains untraced to this day. At precisely 3 p.m., police received the urgent alert about a boy being beaten up and drowned by thugs at the Parliament Hill Lido swimming pool, triggering an immediate response to the chaotic scene. Enrico was rushed without delay to the Royal Free Hospital in Hampstead, where medical staff fought desperately to stabilize him as he lay critically ill in intensive care. His brain had been deprived of oxygen for several critical minutes during the prolonged submersion, inflicting catastrophic and irreversible damage that left doctors with grim prognoses from the outset. In a fleeting moment of brief consciousness amid his labored breaths, Enrico valiantly managed to convey to detectives key details of the horrific torture and assault he had endured. He had been kicked and punched repeatedly and held mercilessly under the water until he drowned. He then slipped back into deep unconsciousness, a state from which he would never again awaken, his young body succumbing to the devastating injuries over the agonizing days that followed. And 11 days after the assault on July 19, 1976, Enrico Sidoli died. His married sister, Mrs. Rosemary Donovan, had flown all the way in from Australia, urgently to be at his bedside, only to land at Heathrow Airport and receive the devastating news that her brother had just passed away hours before her arrival. What ensued was a wave of national outrage over the chilling silence from all of those present at the Lido and the stark lack of witnesses willing to come forward, despite the hundreds or even up to 1,000 people who had been there to see the events unfold in broad daylight. Multiple news outlets delivered continuous scathing coverage, lambasting the community's apparent apathy and collective silence in the face of such a brazen and public act of violence, fueling a broader debate about societal indifferences in 1970s Britain. On the 29th of July, the Evening Express published Detective Chief Inspector Clement's comments attacking the parents of Kentish Town, whom he said were instructing their children to remain silent to the police. He called their silence wicked. DCI Clement installed a special answering machine in the incident room for members of the public to ring in any tips they might have anonymously. What soon became apparent is that the people at the Lido were simply too afraid to speak to the police for fear of their names getting back to certain gangs in the area who were known to use extreme violence, using bottles and knives without fear of consequence. In one such instance, when police learned of a young witness who had likely seen the murder, their parents whisked them away quickly on holiday to avoid detectives. Such was the fear of reprisals for talking. On the 3rd of August, in a ceremony heavy with sorrow, Enrico Sidoli was laid to rest at the Hampstead cemetery, surrounded by grieving family members who had travelled from London and Italy, alongside police officers in attendance, as over 200 mourners gathered solemnly to pay their final respect to the young boy taken so brutally. Just 3 days later, on the 6th of August, 50 police officers, some mounted on horseback, others accompanied by sniffer dogs, descended upon the vast expanse of Hampstead Heath in a determined and highly visible effort to locate the killers of Enrico, combing the area thoroughly for any clues for evidence that might lead to a breakthrough, though these intensive searches ultimately yielded no significant advances in the case. On the 11th of August, the Evening News stepped forward boldly, putting up a £1,000 reward for any information that could lead directly to the arrest and conviction of Enrico's killers, aiming to jolt potential witnesses out of their silence and encourage tips that might finally crack the case. By the 17th of August, a dramatic development emerged when a Greek boy, described as weeping and wailing in evident distress, rang the incident room's special answering machine, blurting out the chilling words, "I didn't mean to do it," in a voice thick with emotion. Detectives swiftly took to the media, issuing urgent appeals for this boy to call them back, emphasizing that the other specific details he had left on the message very likely meant he was genuine and directly involved in the murder, potentially holding the key to unlocking the truth. However, this boy would never call back. Also on that same day, police released a detailed photo fit of one of the youths they desperately wished to speak to in connection with the murder of Enrico. The suspect was described as having strikingly dark eyes, leading police to believe his parents were either Spanish, Greek, or of Italian origin. He was thought to be aged between 17 to 18, standing at 5 feet 8 inches tall, typically wearing denim clothes with black baggy Bay City roller-style trousers, a t-shirt, and wearing an earring. His hair followed the modern rocker style of the time, slightly parted in the middle and feathered at the ends. He may have had a defect in one of his eyes or appeared slightly cross-eyed. Police openly described him as a swaggering bully who went around intimidating and beating up old women and children, painting a picture of a known local menace. The killers were consistently described as dressed in denim, with black Bay City roller-style trousers and carrying tartan scarves around their wrists. These observations, drawn from sightings of them either entering the Lido changing rooms before undressing to swim, or chillingly, after the murder when they had dressed and fled the scene. Following the Evening News's generous offer of £1,000 for information, police were able to compile more comprehensive descriptions of all three of the attackers from emerging tips. The first matched the photo fit closely. The second was described as the same height of 5 feet inches, but he was darker skinned, while the third was described as slightly taller than both of the others, but fairer skinned. DCI Clement openly described the trio as being well known to 5 female pupils in a Kentish Town school, but these girls steadfastly refused to name them, ostensibly out of deep fear or reprisals from the group. The word on the street was that the trio were indeed collectively known as the Kentish Town Mob, a name that struck genuine fear into the local community, underscoring their reputation for intimidation. On Saturday the 21st of August 1976, in an innovative move, Murder Squad detectives attended the Arsenal vs Bristol City football match at Highbury, equipped with photographs of a group of fans who called themselves the Highbury Mob, in the hopes that these men could provide vital leads to help them track those responsible for Enrico's murder. They took care to iterate publicly that these men were not suspects, but rather influential figures within the local scene who would likely be in the know as to who was truly involved in the Lido murder. The following day, a vigilant civilian overheard two boys casually speaking about the Lido murder in public and immediately frog-marched them into Kentish Town Police Station, sternly telling them to give up the names of those responsible. The boys promptly complied under the pressure and are said to have provided detectives with the names of the three boys believed to be behind the attack. The Evening News reported the very next day that these three names indeed coincided with some of those emerging from the flood of approximately 1,000 calls made to police by members of the public seeking the potential £1,000 reward money. The police now had the names of the suspects, but proving their guilt would be another matter entirely. On the 26th of August, Scotland Yard took the significant step of releasing an enlarged section of the candid amateur photo taken during Enrico's resuscitation efforts at the poolside. It prominently shows a young male swimmer seemingly exiting the Lido calmly whilst everyone else is intently watching the area where Enrico lay dying on the deck. Whilst everyone else is facing the unfolding drama in shock and concern, this young male swimmer is turning away and leaving the scene. Police urgently sought this man in direct connection with Enrico's murder, believing he held crucial information. But to date, this man has never been identified, a fact that starkly speaks to the deep unwillingness from locals at the time to engage meaningfully with the police investigation, further entrenching the wall of silence. Then came some breaking news in the case. On the 24th of September 1976, headlines broke the news that murder squad detectives had arrested a 16-year-old youth on suspicion of murdering Enrico Sidoli. He was held for 3 days at Kentish Town Police Station and subjected to intensive questioning. But disappointingly, he was then released without charge after a witness failed to pick him out from an identity lineup. At the coroner's inquest, which would be held the following year, DCI Clement would reveal in his testimony that this young teen suspect that they had arrested and questioned had given several conflicting accounts during interviews and would go on to confess to the killing, only to later retract his confession entirely. In late September of 1976, as part of their widening net, police visited 46 schools in the surrounding areas in a concerted attempt to trace the some 400 pupils who had played truant on the day of Enrico's murder, hoping to unearth more witnesses from among those who had likely been at the Lido, but the pervasive silence continued to frustrate progress. Witnesses continued to claim that they didn't see it or that they had been preoccupied with their own activities. As the initial flurry of police activity wound down in the following months of Enrico's death, detectives encountered profound difficulties in breaking through the community's resolute unwillingness to assist in identifying the killers. Despite taking over 1,000 witness statements from the crowded Lido and surrounding areas in the investigation, many potential informants provided little of value or claimed to have seen nothing, leaving investigators frustrated by what appeared to be widespread apathy in the face of a brutal public crime. Yet this silence was not necessarily just mere indifference. It had stemmed from a genuine, paralyzing fear deeply rooted in the tough streets of 1970s Kentish Town. Residents and potential witnesses lived in dread of being branded a grass, with very real worries of violent reprisals at the hands of the local gangs. The climate of terror effectively shielded the perpetrators, turning the investigation into a protracted struggle against not just the absence of evidence, but a community's enforced omerta, paving the way for the formal inquest that would ultimately deliver a verdict without naming any culprits. In January of 1977, the coroner's inquest into the brutal murder of Enrico Sidoli begins at St. Pancras. Multiple witnesses give evidence at the hearing, though only a handful of teens present would testify of what unfolded. 13-year-old Sandra M. told the court they pushed him under the water. I saw the boy come up above the water once and they pushed him under again. They were not saying anything, they were just laughing. I thought it was a joke. It is quite common for people to muck about at the pool. I did not think it was serious. Another teen, Deborah S., was also at the pool. She told the hearing, I saw a boy shout across to a well-built boy with dark hair and his friend. They walked around to Enrico and pushed him. One of the boys, the tallest, hit him and he fell into the pool. He was shouting back at them. He fell in next to the slide at the deep end. I was quite close to them. Two of the boys jumped in and sat on him. One of them was the one who had struck the boy in the first place. A third boy did not take part. He was just standing there. One of the two boys held Enrico under the water and then came up for breath, while the other boy then went down and held the boy under. They were coming up one at a time. Enrico was trying to get to the top. He did once and they pushed him under again. Then he did not come again. He went to the bottom. I don't know if anyone else noticed what was going on. Everyone was running around playing. The lifeguards were at the shallow end. I went off to see a friend. Then I saw a lifeguard get Enrico out. The coroner, Dr. Chambers, then asked Deborah whether she had seen either one of the two boys since the incident. She said, I have seen one of them in a lineup. I tapped one who looked like one of the boys on the shoulder. Another 13-year-old called Louisa S. said she was standing on a diving board near the water chute. I saw three boys aged about 18. One had dark hair and was wearing a necklace. They were all pushing a boy in the water. They all jumped on him. I then just turned away. Everyone pushes everyone at the pool. They have a game. I did not see any more happen to the boy. I did not look. A 12-year-old boy called David B. said that he was diving into the pool to retrieve tin cans when he found a boy at the bottom. He was bent over, double, clutching his stomach. I did not see anyone near him. I went up to the surface and told my friend Philip to get a lifeguard and then went down to the bottom again. I did bring the boy halfway up, but he was too heavy to bring to the surface. He did not move his arms or any of his other limbs. I had to let him go. Mr. Michael Pierce, the lifeguard, spoke of the horseplay and hooliganism at the pool on many occasions. He said, I have experienced a lot of obnoxious and hooligan behavior at the pool. The inquest also heard from DCI Clement that the prime suspect in Enrico's murder was 16 at the time of the killing and described as being educationally subnormal. Clement stated the suspect gave conflicting statements to police in 4 separate interviews. The boy then admitted to being involved, saying, I did it. I didn't mean to hurt the boy. It was an accident. I was pretending to push people but not actually doing it. I pretended to push him but he lost his balance and we both fell and were struggling to get to the surface. He had hold of my arm and wouldn't let it go and we were struggling, but he slowly let go of the grip and slid to the bottom. I got scared, got out and got dressed. This account differed greatly from the witnesses' evidence where Deborah S. claimed this boy hit Enrico deliberately, leading him to fall into the pool. DCI Clement then informs the court that 3 witnesses had failed to pick out the suspect from an identity lineup, which prompted the 16-year-old to rescind his confession, leading the Director of Public Prosecutions unwilling to proceed with charges. And on the 27th of January 1977, the inquest into Enrico's murder returned a verdict of manslaughter by persons unnamed. The foreman told the court, "We cannot name any names because we do not know any." After the hearing, Mr. Sidoli said, "I shall not be satisfied until the killer is caught, tried and prosecuted. I am happy with the verdict, but am not very pleased with the way that the police dealt with the case. There are certain witnesses which they did not call," he added. In 1986, police reopened the case of Enrico Sidoli after receiving fresh information. Over the coming months, detectives questioned 8 men, including a British soldier aged in his 20s, who was then stationed in West Germany, who was alleged to have been present at the Lido. Detectives then compiled a file of evidence and submitted it to the Director of Public Prosecutions. However, on the 30th of November 1986, the DPP's Sir Thomas Hetherington decided no further action should be taken against the men police believed killed Enrico Sidoli. He cited the passage of time and insufficient evidence for a prosecution. The devastation lingered profoundly for the Sidoli family, a wound that would never heal. Louisa, consumed by unimaginable grief, pain and despair, spent endless days and nights by Enrico's grave at Hampstead Cemetery, her life irrevocably shattered. She was said to have died of a broken heart, her only unfulfilled wish being to know who had taken her eldest son from her and why. She would visit the Lido on anniversaries to drop a flower in quiet tribute into the pool where her son had met his end. Antonio remained haunted by the loss, carrying the unanswered questions until his own passing years later. The siblings, Elizabeth, Rosemary, Yolanda, and Andrew, carried this grief as a perpetual dark shadow over their lives, a constant reminder that justice had eluded them. From that fateful day in 1976, as Sister Elizabeth later reflected, the light went out in their mother's life, and the family's happiness was forever dimmed. Yolanda, just 13 at the time of the tragedy, remembered crying uncontrollably, her young heart broken in a way from which she never fully recovered. She described how, when Enrico died, they all died inside. Nearly 50 years have passed since that cruel summer day, yet the memory of Enrico Sidoli, a gentle, kind-hearted 15-year-old boy with a vivid imagination and a smile that lit up his loving family, endures as brightly as ever in the hearts of those who knew him. His life was cut tragically short in a moment of senseless violence amid a crowd that looked away, leaving behind a family forever fractured and a community haunted by what might have been if someone had intervened. Thanks for watching and listening to Enrico's story. Please feel free to add your own thoughts, comments, and theories down below, and we'll see you next time.